At times, the vocabulary associated with economics can seem very intimidating, and sometimes a textbook explanation of concepts involved in economics doesn't quite break down the ideas into easy-to-digest information for the average student. I know that individuals respond differently to different methods of learning, but I've always found a concept easier to understand when explained with visual aids utilizing familiar ideas. The law of diminishing marginal utility can seem quite complicated given the horrendous length of this term, but I assure you it is a relatively simple concept once you break it down. Here's the textbook's definition. A second explanation of the downward curve is that although consumer wants in general may be insatiable, wants for particular commodities can be satisfied. In a specific span of time over which consumers' tastes remain unchanged, consumers can get as much of a particular good or service as they can afford, but the more of the product they obtain, the less they still want more of it. Now I know I can't speak for everyone, but I'd imagine you are about this interested in that last slide. Here's an explanation that I find easier to digest. I'll explain it with soda, aka pop, Coke, or whatever you prefer to refer to it as, but it applies to multitudes of other products we consumers consume. I like Coke. When I pop the top and begin to consume a can of Coke, I find it really satisfying. Now here's how this plays into the law of diminishing marginal utility. If I were to rate the amount of satisfaction, or as it's referred to in economics, utility, of that first can of Coke, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would of course give it a 10. And at this point, I feel awesome. Now here is where the diminishing part comes into play. As I consume additional cans of Coke, my satisfaction/utility rating changes. I get less use out of each successive can. Here's how my ratings would typically go. On the second can of soda, I'm still getting enjoyment out of it, but it's definitely not as satisfying as the first can. I give it an 8. Soda addict that I am, I'd still probably enjoy a third can, but having already drank 2, the third falls shorter still of that initial satisfaction, so I'll give it a 6. Whenever I have access to an unlimited amount of Coke, I tend to be a bit foolish, so I might even partake of a 4th can. By this time, my rating has taken a pretty sharp drop. The 4th can does not make me feel nearly as good. My rating has dropped down to a 3. And so it goes. If I were to partake of a 5th can, I'd get next to no satisfaction out of it. The 5th can gets a 1. By the 6th can, I'd most likely be feeling sick. I'm worse off than I was prior to consuming any Coke at all. My rating is now negative. Making sense? Now a chart. Here on the left, we have the quantity of Coke consumed. In the next column is the amount of utility each Coke added to my total utility, shown on the right. Optimum utility, or satisfaction, is reached right before my marginal utility drops below 0. Okay, now that you're hopefully on board with me here, how does this apply to economics? Why do we care? The decrease seen with each successive unit of a product limits the demand for a particular product. This is why, when graphed, demand slopes downward. If we assume the average consumer behaves rationally, then the consumer will only buy amounts of a particular product that would be useful to them, even if supply is unlimited. You may not use the same terms to describe the phenomenon of diminishing marginal utility, but it's the concept the average consumer takes into consideration when they make purchases. We try not to buy more than we can happily use. We strive to get the most utility possible. If you buy more than you can use, you've wasted a portion of your already limited income that could have gone towards another, more useful product, increasing your overall utility and satisfaction. And because everything in economics requires an evaluation of elasticity, here's how it relates to elasticity. If marginal utility falls sharply as successive units are consumed, demand is predicted to be inelastic. That is, price must fall a relatively large amount before consumers will buy more of an item. Well, folks, this sums up the law of diminishing marginal utility. Our conclusion is, whether you're an economist or just the average consumer, it matters. And one more thing. Thank you for your attention.